On a cold January afternoon in 1919, Boston's busy North End was shaken by an unimaginable disaster. Without warning, a massive steel tank holding over 2 million gallons of molasses burst open, and within seconds, a dark wave taller than a two-story building roared down Commercial Street, smashing buildings, overturning rail cars, and sweeping people away like they were nothing. When the chaos ended, 21 people were dead, 150 injured, and the surrounding neighborhood left engulfed in a thick, viscous flood of molasses. This strange and tragic event became known as the Great Molasses Flood, and though it might sound like a joke today, for the people of Boston, it was a nightmare they would never forget. To understand how molasses could cause so much destruction, we need to step back into Boston of the early 20th century. The North End is one of the city's oldest and most crowded neighborhoods, home to thousands of Italian immigrants, dock workers, and factory laborers. Narrow streets were strewn with horse-drawn wagons, electric streetcars, and the waterfront bustled with warehouses, distilleries, and shipping yards. Families lived in cramped brick apartments while industry loomed just beyond their doorsteps. Here, work and home pressed together with no buffer between them, an industrial giant and a tight-knit community sharing the same crowded streets. The molasses industry might seem trivial today, but in 1919, it was big business. Molasses was imported in massive quantities, mostly from the Caribbean, and it was used to produce things like rum, but more importantly, it was fermented into industrial alcohol, essential for making munitions during World War I. The company behind it all was the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, or USIA. On Boston's waterfront, just off Commercial Street, USIA built a huge steel tank in 1915 to store incoming molasses shipments. Towering 50 feet tall and nearly 90 feet wide, the tank could hold over 2.3 million gallons. It was one of the largest structures of its kind in the city, and it sat right in the middle of a neighborhood where families lived, children played, and workers passed by daily. From the very beginning, the molasses tank was a problem. Residents complained that it leaked, with children from the North End sneaking underneath with cups to collect some of the syrup that dripped from its seams. Workers also reported strange groaning noises when the tank was full. But USIA brushed off these concerns. Instead of fixing the tank properly, they painted it brown to hide the leaks. They couldn't stop the molasses shipments, especially during wartime when the demand was high, but by 1919, the war was over, and the tank was filled nearly to capacity with the fresh shipment, over 2 million gallons. Inside, fermentation was producing carbon dioxide gas, building internal pressure. Outside, Boston was in the grip of a warm spell. The temperature had jumped to 40 degrees Fahrenheit after weeks of bitter cold, and the steel tank was now warming rapidly in the sun. It was a recipe for disaster. January 15, 1919 began like any other day. Workers loaded wagons, children played in the streets, but around 12:30 p.m., people nearby heard a loud bang, like machine gun fire or a collapsing building. Then, the unthinkable happened. The steel tank split open with a deafening crack, and a wall of molasses surged out, moving at an estimated 35 miles per hour. The wave was 25 feet high at its peak, taller than many buildings in the neighborhood. The thick substance crushed everything in its path. Wooden houses splintered, and wagons were swallowed whole. Freight cars were picked up and tossed as if weightless, and some people were trapped where they stood, unable to outrun the oncoming wave. Even a fire station was knocked clean off its foundation. One firefighter trapped inside later recalled being pinned against the wall by molasses up to his neck. Rescuers had to cut him free with saws. Eyewitnesses described the scene as unbelievable, like a tidal wave, only it was molasses. Another said, everything that moved was twisted and torn like a toy. Men, horses, wagons, and trucks were crushed and drowned. When the waves settled, the North End was unrecognizable. Streets were buried under several feet of molasses, filling up basements and jamming doors shut. Survivors trudged through knee-deep syrup, searching for loved ones. In the end, 21 people were dead, with the youngest being just 10 years old. Another 150 were injured. Horses in the area suffered terribly. Many had to be shot to be put out of their misery. The cleanup? Well, it took months. Crews used shovels, saws, anything they could. They even pumped seawater into the streets to help dissolve the mess. Workers tracked molasses all over the city, onto train cars, trolleys, and public buildings. Boston residents said the smell of molasses lingered for decades. As you can imagine, the public outrage was swift. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company tried to claim the disaster was caused by anarchists who had bombed the tank, but an investigation revealed the truth. The tank was poorly built, poorly maintained, and unsafe from the start. The tank's steel walls were dangerously thin, and it had never undergone proper safety tests. Over time, its rivets loosened, giving clear warning signs that the structure was failing. Yet USIA brushed aside the evidence, choosing profit over safety and ignoring the neighborhood's repeated complaints. The resulting lawsuit became one of the largest civil cases in Massachusetts history, lasting nearly 6 years. In the end, USIA was found liable. They paid over $600,000 in damages, around $9 million today, compensating victims and families. Today, the Great Molasses Flood remains one of Boston's strangest tragedies. A small plaque on Commercial Street marks the spot where the tank once stood. Few people know the story, but for decades after the incident, the memory lingered vividly among survivors and their families. The disaster also had lasting impact. It helped shape modern regulations for construction and corporate responsibility. Engineers began demanding stricter safety codes and inspections, and the courts held a corporation accountable for negligence in a way that set precedent for decades. What seems almost comical at first glance was in truth a deadly industrial accident. It's a reminder that history is full of stories both strange and sobering, and sometimes reality is stickier and far more tragic than fiction.